Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. On behalf of everyone at Rev.io, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. I'm Delaney Dabkowski, Rev.io's Marketing Execution Manager. Before we begin the presentation, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, audio will automatically come in through your computer speakers. Second, a recorded version of this webinar will be emailed to you within 2 days. Third, we will be having a Q&A session at the end of the event. Please submit your questions via the Zoom control panel at any point during the live presentation. For those of you just joining us, welcome. Today, Jason Burns, Senior VP of Operations at NetSapiens, will be discussing how some service providers are growing at 3 times the industry average. Jason Byrne brings more than 20 years of telecom leadership experience to NetSapiens, a leading UCaaS platform for service providers, where he leads strategy and marketing. Previously, he held various product leadership positions spanning wireline and wireless solutions at Greenlee Communications and JDSU. Jason has an MBA from University of San Diego and a BSEE from Trinity College, Dublin. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jason.
Great. Thank you very much, Delaney. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I think this is probably close to my 20th webinar we've done since June. How things have changed in the last 6 months or 5 months. If you could see the backdrop on my wall, I usually have, I keep adding more and more trade show lanyards and stuff, and I've not added any more, but I have added about 20 more on the webinar side. So it's good to keep getting the message out and keep getting that feedback from and questions from our customers and partners. I think, like Delaney mentioned, let's see if we can make this as interactive as possible. So feel free to stop me at any time, put your questions through that Q&A box, and we'll take it from there and try and address them as they come in. So maybe one slide, a quick self-promo, just a single slide on who we are. We are a communications, collaboration, and contact center provider. We've been around for 17, almost 18 years now. We are up to about 175 global or service providers around the globe. So that's pretty significant. I show 1.4 million seats here in service. We're actually we're about to put out a press release showing 1.5 million seats here in the November timeframe. So significant growth. We've, in the last 12 months, we've gone from 1 million seats to 1.5 million seats within 12 months. And that's staggering. I mean, that's 3 times the growth of the industry in UC or contact center or the combined. So really what I wanted to do is share with you some of the insights we get from that global service provider community that we service, as well as some of the standards bodies and surveys that we've seen and actually produce as well. So I think we should start off. Let's take a quick snapshot from McKinsey, one of the very expensive management consultants, but they do put out some good work. Here's a great survey of the impact that COVID's going to have, or was forecasted to have. I believe this was produced in April. And it gives you a highlight of which of the verticals are going to be the most impacted. And the obvious ones here: accommodation, food services, clearly, but I think that you'll see they've adopted pretty quickly. But all the way goes back to finance, insurance, more like the information folks who can work remote, less impacted. But I thought this is a great snapshot of how, what verticals have been impacted the most, and thus impacting your own revenues. Education, I know my son just got back to school yesterday or Tuesday, and that's been severely impacted. And so what I wanted to do now is take a snapshot of today, right? So where are we at from a hospitality side? So I quickly looked at Marriott's Q4. You can see on November 9th, they're back to 94% of their hotels around the world are back in operation, almost 100%. And their occupancy doubled in the last quarter. Now, granted, it took a severe hit in Q2, but they're doubling and getting growing. And not only that, they're actually investing in building new hotels, more rooms organically, as well as inorganic, acquiring new hotels, rebranding, and that sort of thing. So I did want to put, shine a light on hospitality. While it is getting impacted, they are continue to invest and they continue to grow from Q2's numbers. Now let's look a little more detail. So bear with me, I've got a lot of data to present. The good news is Delaney is going to record this and send the slides out later at a later date. So you will have all this data. Now let's quickly look at another section in the of industry, retail. Let's start off with retail. Top left, you can see it took a massive hit back in March, April, almost 50% decline. But look where it's at now. And this is September, right? So we're almost a month and a half better data than that, and it's down to 10%. So folks are starting to recover. I mean, the retail side, if you look at malls, people are starting to return to malls. You can see it's already back up to only 20% to 37% decline over where it was. But that's significant versus 100% foot traffic disappeared. On the food service side, you can see here, what I want to focus now on is what is the go forward plan for each of these verticals. And if you look on the bottom left, you'll see it's technology. All right, it's apart from curbside pickup, drive-through, delivery that we've all used, but the go forward is more frictionless transactions, right? Mobile ordering, having the apps to get what you need and the information you need to make those decisions on food service. If you look on the far right, the bottom right, this is a survey of respondents who say their organization are considering or implementing change. And I did want to highlight two of those boxes at the very top of this list is technology, use of technology and systems and approach to innovation. And it's innovation through systems, but also innovation through technology. And then if you look at the main reasons why are people investing, it's speed, right? This is post-COVID. If you look at that middle bottom chart, you'll see speed is the most frequently cited reason why orgs are making changes, COVID-related changes. Number one reason is speed to transaction, speed to whatever that goal is. Information exchange, transactional speed's number one, followed by, I think it looks like cost reduction, productivity, and some cost reduction stuff. Customer focus actually gets relegated to third position. So just wanted to highlight some of the trends in across the different verticals that they are on the mend, or at least adjusting. Let me be clear, adjusting to the new life, the new norm. Long-term view and remote work, I'm sure a lot of you see this, but what I really want to highlight here is if you look on the left-hand side, will employees continue to work from home? Absolutely. You can see yes, and probably some up to about 70%. And that does not imply 5 days a week. That implies part-time in there, maybe 1 day a month, 1 day a week, whatever that is. It's a mix of, it's a hybrid of in-office and out. And a lot of folks, I'm sure, will just work remote 100% of the time. Key thing from this slide, the so what for this slide is the right-hand side. Look at the difference as you go up in size or scale of enterprise. Big differences, bigger increase on the larger enterprise. They have the systems to support this, but it's still a very large, significant piece, even at the smaller scale, less than 250 employees. Let's keep going here. So how has this impacted, right? So we talked about the different verticals, the impact they've had. We've talked about the work from home. What has changed from a market perspective, from a unified communications, from a contact center, or even video communications? You can see here, well, from a product offering standpoint, video was the clear winner, right? So if you look at that chart on the right-hand side, what has been the big increase in features or functions? Video was the clear winner. UC was on a path to mobile first. I've had a ton of collateral, ton of content ready to start publishing on mobile first. Quickly now shifted to focusing on video first. The world has gone video first. You can see mobile apps clearly in second place, but by far the delta between that and video is substantial. And one other thing to note is team collaboration didn't increase. And again, this is from CCA, so let me be clear where my sources are. Cloud Communications Alliance, this is across hundreds of service providers across the globe. Recent survey results out from Q3. It was presented probably 2 weeks ago. just to set expectations. But back to, you can see team collaboration. I honestly thought that would be much higher, but it's not. Pretty key thing to note. And the other thing to keep note from CCA's research was contact center features. Was almost non-existent here, which is pretty interesting. Now that's changed since COVID, right? Not going forward, but changed since COVID, and contact center barely makes doesn't even make the mark here. So, but if I want you to remember one thing from this slide, this is a shift to more video depending on the size of the organization. If you look in the bottom left, you can see, small organizations, it's 50% roughly. But if you go up to a large organization, they're forecasting at 95% usage within the next 2 years or next year. So that's substantial. Substantial change or variation depending on the size of the organization. And you're going to see this, and I'm going to try and tie this back to why certain service providers are growing with this vertical segment, as well as the size of the enterprise in that vertical are the two key things there. One other thing of note I want to touch on here is the service provider's focus. Where do they see the future for their business? And if you look on the left-hand side, and this is from a UC standpoint, you can see the vast majority, 2/3 of their business is in an SME or SOHO today. But if you look at the red, you'll see, there's a great shift. There's a big shift happening where both SOHO and small, medium enterprise are actually declining as a market share. It's still going to be the lion's share, but it is on the declining market. However, the mid-market and large enterprise are growing. So there is a shift from a service provider focus, from a success where they're getting their revenues. They're starting to be pulled more up market, which is a significant thing which I want to touch on. You'll see this as a recurring theme. On the right-hand side, let's put things into perspective. You can see, today we're at 52 million seats globally, but the market size is substantial, 400 million seats. So 52 is penetrated, 400, so 350 still to go. Massive early adopter phase with massive growth. Where's the largest growth? SMBs, you can see just to my previous point, if you look on that chart, 13% is all the growth is in the SMB, but it is the lion's share. I'm not saying we should walk away from that or turn our back on the small, but if you look at the enterprise, that's where the significant growth, 2% penetration in cloud, and that's why there's 41% growth. So I do want to draw a distinction between small and large, not just on features, functions, or channels. All depends on the vertical and the size of the enterprise. So what are the different things that folks are focusing on in order to get that success, right? That breakout velocity in revenues and sales. First thing they've got to do is, okay, if we're being pulled into more larger and larger organizations, and maybe it's not an enterprise, maybe it's just from small SOHO into SME, the theme seems to carry through in that you got the same request for mobile, right? Fully integrate fixed and mobile telephony, the best UI you can provide. The big distinction between small and large when folks are entering into these is the advanced solutions. They're looking for the best of breed. And the most important, the key takeaway here is that it specializes in their industry, really embeds themselves with their applications, with their third-party applications that they use, the CRMs, whatever that integration is, or how you embed it. This is the key to the success for the folks who are having success in those larger organizations. Really want to focus on that, embedding yourself into that vertical, rather than a sort of a shotgun approach. Well, this approach works for everybody. It's the folks who are having more success are the ones who spend the time and effort embedding themselves into that industry with more value for that vertical. And I guess that's the key takeaway here. If you look at this slide, it's it's all about integrations. It's number one service provider differentiation is through the APIs and integrations that embed you into that vertical. And let me be more specific, vertical specific integrations. So you can see why the left chart, but what is detailed on the right, customizing contact centers. That's a big part of any contact center workflow. you got to do some customizations based on what they're looking for. CRM specific to the industry they serve. Not everybody is on Salesforce.com or HubSpot, for that matter. And the list goes on, right? So what I don't have is the list of integrations of which application is broken down by industry. That is up to you guys. And that is your secret sauce to get that information. Figure out what your go-to-market strategy is. But I do want to highlight that focus is where folks are having a lot of success. I think that, and then the last one down below is something that there's a lot of traction going on in the vendor space, which means the service providers will see this pretty soon, is more around mobile, right? So having APIs, whether it's an API or an actual fully fledged, CPaaS offering for mobile, allow cloud communications providers to replace that cellular provider, become that MVNO and embed it into your own overall offering. And that's something I think you'll see in the next 6 months from vendors in this space to enable you to go capture a much larger chunk of the wallet, or really get a piece of that of their spend. I think the last couple of full-on overloading you with data here is really the plan feature. So I looked at, which I just showed you where folks have been investing since COVID started. This is a view of going forward. Where are they planning to invest? And if, another great survey by CCA, again, very recent data, Microsoft Teams dominates, right? If you just have to go look across any service provider offering, one of the first things they talk about is, we've got Microsoft Teams integrated. That is one of the number one demands from enterprises and businesses. And having it seamlessly integrate with your platform, with the UC, having click to dial, having control of that Microsoft Teams where all that traffic, so the end user continues to use the tool of choice, but all that UC traffic, all the phone calls, all that stuff still continues to go through your switch. You have control, you can monetize that. The other thing to note here is, adding more and more channels for that contact center, the Omnichannel. This one always blows me away, how the interest, I think the hype is doing really well, doing a really good job on that. But if you look at the data, and this is recent from Gallup, 93% of customer interactions on a contact center happen over the phone. It's voice. But Omnichannel gets a lot of the hype, trying to future-proof years down the road. But this is like, the phone was going to go away years ago. Well, guess what? It never did. So this seems to be on the same path. So a lot of folks focus on getting the full Omnichannel experience, which I think is a great strategy, but not be very, aware that the vast majority of your traffic is still going to be on voice. Something to pay attention to, especially at the high prices the contact center vendors are charging, massive, $100 plus per seat, and when you're only paying for voice. So the other thing, you have to ask yourself, are you super high prices for channels that you're barely using? Is that something you want to focus on? Anyway, some more features likely being planned by providers are video, obviously video, those who haven't implemented video, and more APIs, right? And then self-provisioning, and this is a key thing, right? As you compete with the likes of 8x8, RingCentral, whoever that is, the retail arms, they are getting more automated. They are adding more and more self-provisioning. So you'll see a lot of, I think over the coming year or two, you'll see more functionality coming out to support self-provisioning, to support onboarding, self-onboarding. All of this to enable service providers like you guys to compete far more seamlessly or effectively against some of those big retail chains. If I move on to the next slide, here I just wanted to touch on, take a step back and look at the size of the market itself, more at the macro level. And back to the title of the webinar, I guess, right? So the 3 cloud offerings were UC, collaboration, and contact center. Here's the size of the market. You can see, market size in UC is far bigger, contact center smaller, but they're roughly growing at roughly the same rate. Massive growth rates from a compound annual growth, but the biggest chunk is in that UC space. I haven't put in video conference here. It depends who you ask and which survey or which analyst. But the key thing to highlight here, I think, is the need for video, right? We already know telephony is table stakes. But one of the main reasons some service providers are growing faster is that trifecta, right? The trifecta of having a contact center, telephony, and collaboration all in one pane of glass, right? And I want to emphasize that. Having a single UI that can support the contact center, that all the full suite of telephony features and all the collaboration that you get from a Zoom or whatever else, having that under a single pane of glass from a service provider standpoint has been instrumental in the growth of the fastest growing service providers we've seen. So having sort of three disconnected ones can be quite cumbersome. A lot of end users have issues with, having a switch, context switch, all that sort of thing. So you'll see the end user demand is certainly swinging heavily towards the center of that circle. And I know that's where we play, but I did want to highlight that's the way the industry and the end users are focused on. And also one neck to choke, right? That's another side benefit of having a single user, single vendor in the middle. They have that, sort of single neck to choke. I should come up with a better phrase than that. But the point is, there's no need for bolt-ons. Bolt-ons are not what they're looking for. They're not a single pane of glass. And then these service providers really, they have been the fastest growing when you have that offering, the full suite. And the last thing I want to touch on is again, on perspective, just look at how many seats. If you look in the bottom right, I touched on it, 50 million seats, 150 domestic is the potential, but globally we're looking at 400. Again, another source of data, reiterating what I found earlier. So we are truly in the early adopter phase. Early adopter both in each sort of solution, both in UC and contact center. And we've identified where the success is coming from. Is certainly from the trifecta, those offering a trifecta. That's sort of the key takeaway I want you to take from this slide. So now let's back up a little less hardcore data. If you look at some of the strategic initiatives, this is on a global basis. So let me be clear. Some of the strategic initiatives service providers are focusing on, the survey came back and showed new geographies, right? The good news is it's a cloud-based solution. You can attack new geographies very, very easily. And that's something that's native with our, all the vendor solutions, being able to leverage, geo redundancies and solutions so that you can scale both nationally and internationally. We touched on vertical market segments, right? How you need to embed yourself in there. It's not a shotgun approach that's having success. It's having very specific niche, meeting the needs of that niche through integrations, through APIs, wrapping around the systems that are embedded inside those verticals. That's a key part of it there. Obviously, acquisitions, M&A is a big part of any strategic focus. And then launching a mobile. I did talk about that. That's something I do think will be coming very soon for a lot of folks, is not just a mobile app, but having a true native dialer, really taking control of the mobile phone and having your own MVNO. And this is going to be a big part of we think of a strategic initiative from service providers. So now let me just touch on sales, right? We've talked about product and verticals and stuff like that. What about the channel itself? There's there was a whole, I don't know if any of you attended CCA, but there was a whole webinar, a couple of webinars just in the channel alone because of the changes that are happening across the service provider community. I thought this is a great slide, very easy to sum up. I did grab it, so I will admit to pilfering here. Always quote your source, but you can see in the top, you see this nice chart at the top here. Master agents, highly compensated, all the way down to affiliates, e-commerce referrals, but digital in the middle here. What we are seeing, and what certainly the service provider community itself as a whole are seeing, is the shift away. Slowly but surely, master agents are becoming less important. They still, folks are still going to be using them, but they are investing in other channels. And that's what I want to touch on here, is just introduce this whole concept of, the 6 spiff or 6x spiffs or 7x spiffs that master agents are on. I do think we're close to a peak, because the channel focus is shifting away from that because of how the end users want to consume, how they want to research, how they want to make their decisions. It's less and less because of the workforce. And I'll get into the workforce thing pretty soon here. The workforce changes. Let me touch on this. This one grabbed me by, it wasn't by surprise, but the mere fact of talking, instead of talking master agents, talking about these emerging channels like influencers. You hear this on social media, but you never think of B2B. It's always B2C. But now this is making huge inroads into B2B and even in the cloud service provider community. Again, this is survey research done on the community and itself. So shadow channels, I don't understand too much what the accounting CPAs and the like management consultants can do from a shadow standpoint, but certainly influencers, and then X as a service, again, wrapping it under whether it's infrastructure or platform as a service. There's change afoot. I think that's the key thing here I want to emphasize. And why is there change afoot in the channel side? Here's some really good stark data that I wanted to share with you from a workforce. If the workforce, the end users, the buyer personas are changing dramatically, clearly the way they want to consume, the way they want to research has to change with it. And that has less and less reliance on the master agents. I think if you look at the top left, the key thing for me here is 80% of buyers state salespeople are not equipped to meet their needs. That's a complete mind shift. I mean, that's a paradigm shift over what we do, what we see, what we believe, what we perceive to actually be true. And then 73% of business buyers prefer connecting via social, again, through digital. So why is that? And it's the millennials, right? I think I'm going to show you a stat. I don't have it here, but millennials became the dominant section of the workforce back in 2016. Not it's coming. It already happened. The millennials are the biggest generation, the largest generation in B2B, or the workforce and B2B. And that's significant, right? The way they consume data, the way they make decisions on vendors, it's significantly changed than before. You know, you can see, what is it, 57% of buyer decisions are made before buyers even speak to a person. 88%, you know, start their journey online with content and recommendations within their network. This is key. They're getting feedback from their peers long before they even talk to a salesperson or a master agent. And 91% of buyers prefer to engage with an expert recommended by their connections, again, their peers, versus a coin-operated salesperson. And this is where influencers have a big part to play, right? So the end users, the way they want to consume, the way they want to research, totally changed. This is why the new norm is digital. Digital channels is the direction that everyone's being pulled in. And we really feel if you're not going down this path, you are going to be significantly hampered or a significant headwind as you go forward. Here was the some news from Cavell Group, again based out of the UK, but they do most of their work in the US. And you can see, where do they get their advice? I just find it so interesting that it's no longer just magazines and websites and talking to a sales guy. If you look at the small organization, the green here, you'll see reviews, comparison sites, testimonials, things like that are where people are making, you know, informed decisions. Talking to colleagues and their peers, another, again, massive part of their decision-making process. And that's because of the workforce has changed. And then it is slightly smaller, not huge difference for the larger organizations. You do see the IT, you know, the industry magazines and websites, which we all love to invest in, is a bigger part for the larger organizations. So it depends where you are looking to position yourself go forward, where you are positioned today. Hopefully this will give you some insight into where you need to invest from a channel standpoint. Some pretty startling news there. So if I was to sum that up, you know, if I was to go through, and I know I gave you a lot of data here so far, if you go through what are the three things we've seen for the fastest growing service providers that are out there, right? And you're looking at 20% growth is the industry. And the first thing is folks who have totally changed their commercial model. Commercial model meaning towards the vendor themselves. The second thing is having that combined solution, that 3 platforms in one, mandatory. Folks are just, even if, it's one having a single pane of glass, not everybody needs all 3 solutions, but having 3 under one single pane of glass resonates so well with a lot of folks. But I will argue that features and speeds and feeds, we all think we've got the best. Everyone's pretty much on a par when it comes to speeds and feeds. It's the holistic approach, right? Having all 3 in one, getting the commercial model, and then enabling you to differentiate into those verticals through APIs, through integrations. These are the 3 sort of building blocks that we've seen as common across all the fastest growing SPs that are out there. And maybe I can touch on just a little more. If you look at, and I want to really focus here on the desk phone, really is what the takeaway here is. Because the younger generation are coming in, they're using more devices. They use their cell phone and the desk phone app, not just the desktop or a desk phone app, desktop app. And I'll get into a little more detail, but 4% of seats are on a call at any one time. That's tiny. Before, when there were no other devices, it was the desk phone. But that's changed because of that workforce, right? 75% within a couple of years here, the Millennial Generation will make up 3/4 of the workforce. Outstanding changes coming our way, and that's on the digital side. So I did want to touch on that. So again, part of the when I talk about changing the commercial model, this is something that's like the best kept secret across the service provider community, is that vendors don't want you to know about this, and that is oversubscription. And oversubscription's been around for so long. The fact that you can sell in, let's say, 100 seats into a business, but at any one time, not everyone's using it, but you are still paying your vendor on a per seat basis. This is what's happening in the industry right now. Service providers are waking up going, hold on a second. If I sell 100 seats, there's only 25, there's only 4 phones at 25 to 1. The oversubscription is the amount of time someone is on the amount of people that are on the phone at any one time. And currently in 2020, it was late 2020, 2019, it was 25 to 1. Every 25 seats you sell, only 1 was actually on a desk phone. That is significant. Yet service providers continue to pay on a per seat basis. Why is that? And by the way, it's growing at 20%. That gets you to 75 to 1. That's less than 1% of your seats will be actually using their desk phone within the next couple of years. 1%. But you will continue to have to pay your service provider or your vendors on a per seat basis. That's not acceptable. Service providers are going, hold on a second. This means you're keeping all the margin as the oversubscription goes up, you being the vendors. So service providers have quickly shifted. They're having conversations with their vendors saying, hold on a second, I need to leverage this oversubscription, this growing oversubscription. I need to get hold of that margin. If I can invest that margin dollars into differentiating, that's how people are succeeding. So I did want to bring this to your attention. It is like the best known secret that vendors don't want you to know is the use and leveraging of oversubscription. Make sure your vendor has, differs from a per seat. Don't pay your vendors on a per seat basis. Pay them on a session, and a session is like an active session, whether it's a call or whatever. The point is, the momentum, the train has started. It's barreling down the tracks at this. So you will see a huge paradigm shift in how service providers start paying for their vendors away from a per seat basis. And we are really in the early adopter phase. So if your vendor does not have this now, you need to have those conversations because this is what the commercial change that's happening or is about to happen in the next couple of years. How does that translate? Here's a really good, interesting fact to help drive home that message. Of the almost 3 billion employees around the globe, 80% don't even have a desk, right? So that means your addressable market, if you're on a global basis, even within the US, assume the same, 20% of the US workforce has a desk. However, Cisco just put out a recent stat showing 60% of their time is not actually spent at their desk. So now you're reduced even more. And then when you do the math on oversubscription, only 4% of employees are ever on a call at one time. But the current commercial model, and this is really to drive home, I was trying to help emphasize the commercial inefficiency that service providers are paying for. You're paying for that 60%, that 20% of folks who do have a desk. You're paying it from there all the way across, yet only 4% are actually using it at any one time. So why is that? So service providers really are starting to ask, pay attention, see if they can capture more of that margin dollars to reinvest in the differentiation. I thought this is a good slide to help convey that message. Today, vendors are charging you, across the board for that 20% of the marketplace, but only 4% are actually on a call at any one time of the 40%. Let me be clear. So it's much smaller percentage. Why don't you pay your vendors on an active call? Not all the seats that you have, but on an active call. So hopefully I haven't harped on too much about that. Why is 80% of the workforce deskless? Hospitals, healthcare, retail, hospitality, education, things like this. There's far more deskless workers that are out there than there are with desks. So I just wanted to try and convey that. We're getting close here, so and I still haven't seen any questions come in. So feel free to post if you have any questions come by. So now, we touched on the commercial model. The commercial models with vendors have to change in order for you to succeed, in order to reinvest, that margin dollars into differentiating. Back to the combined solution, you got to have that video first offering. Customers are looking to empower that remote workforce, scalable and secure. Secure being the operative word. You just have to go look at Zoom and a few other places talking about secure breaches and stuff like that. You do need a very secure offering. One of the big things you'll need to focus on from a video conferencing and meeting solution. Collaboration, making collaboration more personal, engaging with the high-def video. And basically enabling, you need to have a platform that enables that in-office experience without being there, right? Giving them the visual cues you do not get over audio or a webinar like we're on here. First we talked about customers that shifted to mobile first, but now it's really video first. So they're really looking for solutions that deliver that in-office experience, securely connected, and most important for service providers, put your brand on it. We talked about collaborate anywhere on a device, shared workspace, staying connected, all of that. And the added benefit of video and video first is webinars. You are able to now monetize and brand your own webinars with these video first offerings from vendors. And that is pretty significant. I know our offering goes up to 1,000 people webinar with your brand on it. So enabling much larger revenues. If you look at the pricing for large scale webinars, it's significant. So there's a big chunk of money sitting on the table when it comes to webinars. What else I want to touch on is contact center, making sure we have a cloud native contact center solution, enterprise grade. And it's really, I think what I'm seeing is people are focusing away from contact center and calling it customer experience platforms. Really turning experience experts, turning analytics and insights into results. That's been the big thing. And then lastly, on the UC side, right? Again, anywhere, any device, messages, meetings, calls, and making sure it scales from small or SOHO all the way up to the large enterprise. Making sure you have, Microsoft Teams integration out of the box, and then leave you with the APIs that you need to go there. I know we have over 240 APIs that we expose to our base, so they can offer that differentiation, that value around there. And that's really what I think I might have just jumped ahead here, but having that 250 integrations, having that plus the APIs as well, across the board will help you differentiate into each of those verticals. Obviously, you need the support of all the different endpoints that they might already have, or endpoints that you want, or is your preferred choice. And then the last thing I want to touch on here is, from a service provider standpoint, is the deployment model. Your cloud or ours? There's a lot of folks going. There was IDC stated last year at a trade show, 80% of the revenue is actually above the infrastructure. 80%. Why are service providers focusing on running their own infrastructure when the vast majority of the revenues, the profits, are above the infrastructure? Why not outsource that? Get away from the CapEx needs, and startup costs, especially when your equipment starts to become old-fashioned or out of date. Basically leveling the playing field without having to have the big bank accounts to do that. So we're seeing a big shift towards that. I know we're seeing a significant percentage of our new customers coming in, and they are choosing the zero CapEx model on a deployment side. And I think I'm down to my last slide. Let me see how we're doing, 10:40. So in summary, if I was to really go through this, start with the commercial model. You've got to change that commercial model to give you the margins to reinvest, to differentiate. That's where we're seeing the folks who can succeed. And I was being a little facetious here, but 3 things sure in life: death, taxes, and the channel is definitely going to change. The workforce is changing, the channel is changing. We need to adapt in order to do that, not just at the service provider, but also the vendors themselves. And then having that combined 3-in-1 solution under a pane of glass, I would almost argue that's table stakes. If you don't have that, you've got some significant headwinds against you as you try and expand and grow at the pace others are growing. You might be growing at a very happy, healthy rate, but are you growing as quickly as others? Are you gaining market share? Most public companies love to see the top line, but they also reward for gaining market share, and that's one of the things here. And then differentiate. Again, this I can't emphasize enough, at the application layer, embedding yourself across the different vertical, or within that vertical, sorry. And then so let me see, I see a question coming in here. When will you be on the East Coast? Come visit. Absolutely, Ozzy. As soon as things pick up and the vaccines come out here pretty quickly, hopefully we'll do. Although right now I'm just traveling by car. Today I've got to hit the road, but yeah, absolutely, we'll be hitting the East Coast. We'll do another East Coast swing here. So hopefully I've given you some insights into where we perceive what we've seen, both internally from our base, 170 service providers, and the industry as a whole, with some of this great CCA research that they've put together in the last couple of weeks. So with that, I think I will hand it back to Delaney, if I can. Maybe some questions?
Yeah, that was great, Jason. Thank you so much for your time. Before we begin the Q&A portion of the presentation, I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today and review a few housekeeping items. The first reminder is that we're always interested in topics that you'd like to learn more about, so please submit your topics in the Q&A box. In addition, the full webinar recording will be emailed to you within 2 days. Lastly, if you've submitted any questions during the presentation that don't get addressed in the live Q&A, we will be following up with you individually via email. Now I'd like to ask a few questions from our audience. Jason, you talked about the shift of the service providers to the right, meaning larger and larger businesses. Is this your recommendation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm not advocating, one or the other. It all depends on the offering you have, your ability to service that segment if you do choose to go up market. That ability to service is probably the number one thing you need to focus on. Can you service it if you do go up market? I showed that the greater than 1,000 seats has the highest growth potential. It is currently the smallest share. But you need to ask yourself, can you service those customers? Do you have the right, the tight vertical integration to go land and find a beachhead in that segment? So I'm not saying everybody turn to the right and march, because clearly the SOHO and the SME will still be the larger portion of this space, and for a considerable amount of time. However, it is declining. Maybe I should equate it to your fishing in Long Beach Harbor. I was just up there for a cross-country run with my kid, and it's a massive, massive harbor you can fish in, massive. But if you want to go fish the ocean, perhaps that's another approach that you can. Again, find out if you can service that. Do you have the vertical integrations to go there? It's purely a choice on a per service provider basis. I think and do you have the channel? And that's what I mean by service both in product and channel. Hopefully that answers your question, Delaney.
Thank you. And you showed some hesitancy or disbelief on omnichannel contact center. Why is that?
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, it came through on my webinar here. Yeah, good point. So that was on the features service providers are planning to offer, right? Omnichannel is if you go on any contact center website, content webinars that they're pushing, it's all about Omni. But it blows my mind that 93% of contact center interactions are still over with voice. So I was simply highlighting the lower priority need for the other channels, but the contact centers are charging over $100 for those additional when you add in all those channels. Do you really need them? That's my point. Certainly, I think the future is there, but I wanted to put things into perspective. The vast majority, almost 100% of interactions is over voice. So be careful as you go forward with contact centers, paying for those premiums. Ask those questions. What are you seeing? And you mightn't even get the truth, but you will. You probably should do some homework yourself to find out. You do need a platform with voice at its core. You need that full suite of PBX, full suite of contact center voice suite services. Intelligent routing. All of that needs to be there. That should be the priority when selecting contact centers. And that's simply based on almost 100% of interactions, are coming through voice. Yeah, hopefully that answers that.
You mentioned how the channel is changing. What should be our top priority in channel strategy?
Yeah. So I didn't mean to put the fear of God into people. I've been accused of that quite a bit. I wouldn't make any wholesale changes at this point. But you do need to start planning. You got to continue servicing your channel today, and if that's being fed mostly through master agents or the like, then that needs to continue. But you do need to start investing in the digital side. The workforce cares more about referrals and their peers rather than hearing from a master agent or a salesperson. And that's what I'm trying to do is don't take your eye off the how you service today, but you do need to really invest for the future on the digital side, making sure and there's so much work there, and it is a different selling, different channel, different investment levels. Could be less, could be more. I'm not 100% sure, depending on the verticals you're chasing. But there is a shift away from that indirect channel. It might be slow, but just look at the workforce. 75% are going to be millennials within 4 years. That tells me something. That tells me this is changing quickly. So yeah, I think that was my point there.
And tell me about the commercial model of not paying per seat. Where are service providers at in relation to shifting to this model?
Yeah, well, clearly we're a little biased, right? We see our 170 plus service providers have gone down this path. And we're starting to get more and more interest on the commercial model than ever before. Like the folks the conversations we're having is primarily around commercial models. And this is what's driving 50% seat growth in a year. That's 3 times or 2.5 times the industry growth. So where is the industry, back to your question, Delaney, where is the industry as a whole? It's in the early adopter stage when it comes to commercial models. But the service providers, they are asking, their vendors, the question, why am I paying you on a per seat basis when it's rarely used? Why is that? That you're keeping all that margin and I'm left with it in a cost plus model of picking up the crumbs. So you need to have that hard conversation with your vendors. And if they aren't embracing that industry shift that's happening, then perhaps they're not the vendor to take you to that next level, at least to keep you at the same growth as others, so you're not losing market share. So yeah, I think that's probably the message I'm trying to drive home here.
When you mentioned that the channel is evolving, do you think we should invest massively in self-provisioning to address the digital marketing sources?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it is dependent on the size of the organization you're addressing. Certainly Soho, if you look at 8x8 Ring Central, they are really trying to target the Soho with self-provisioning. And as you go more up market, meaning larger enterprises, they are doing some self-provisioning, and they have some conversations and roadmap content they're putting out where they talk about adding more self-provisioning up market, but you got to start there. I think the SOHO, the SME is where you'll have the most success. And then when it comes to vertical integration, that's not self-provision. That's you got to sit down with their team, their tech teams, and really embed yourself into what value you can wrap around their applications. But really good question. Should you invest in self-provisioning? Yes. If you are in that SOHO and SME space, and there will be some benefit for that in the larger enterprise.
If we don't have personnel on staff that have the ability to write applications or integrations using the APIs, do you have a list of third-party integration partners that we could reach out to?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely, we do. There's a few out there, Access Networks and a few others that can help on that stuff. So yes, there are. And that's clearly where folks are. We've seen, the fastest growing partners we have are the ones who have invested, who've taken that, margin dollars invested into the differentiation and really focusing on embedding themselves in those verticals. And there certainly reach out to me. Have my email and phone. Reach out to me. We can get you connected to those folks.
When will the native mobile app be out?
That's a great question. That's something I know we are working on. That's something that's going to probably be Q1 of next year that I'd love to get this out, where you now have an MVNO. So a good example of this and the value this brings is there was one service provider who services a very niche vertical, and he walked in and was maybe 20, 30 phones that he was about to cross over into his platform or sell. But as he was leaving the office, leaving the meeting, the guy goes, "I do have 60 people out in the field using cell phones." So now you've gone from a 20 plus, desk phone deal to a 60 plus communications deal, and at higher revenues, top line, and potentially higher margins. So that's why I think the value with mobile and having that mobile first offering is massive. You now expand. You've now changed your addressable market from the guys who sit at a desk to anybody, because everybody's got a cell phone. Anybody in that organization can now be under your sort of under your umbrella as an offering standpoint. That can double, triple, depending on what sort of vertical you're in. That can easily, a multiple of what business or addressable market you could have by saying, "Well, by the way, we can take care of your mobile as well," all under one bill. Right? So all the VC, all the video conferencing, the contact center, the full-on desk phone, all the UC. Oh, by the way, we'll also do your mobile. That's something that's coming, I think, from a service provider standpoint, and pretty fast. And now you're starting to, and the value is, you're probably going to be very similar in pricing to the AT&Ts of the world. But when you have that wrapped around a full single pane of glass solution, single bill, that's very, very attractive to end users. And we're seeing huge traction with the conversations we're having with folks on that product.
Please elaborate on the definition of self-provisioning.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's maybe start off with self-onboarding. What you got to ask the question: do I need to talk to anybody? Do I need to provide a credit card over the phone? Do I need to have them customize anything for my particular business? I being the end user. Hopefully not. Right? Most people, again, millennials hate to just communicate through the usual or the older channels, such as the phone. They'd rather do things digitally. So if the workforce is changing, then having the ability to service that through, whatever the different steps you typically take from an onboarding standpoint, those are the steps I'm talking about from a provisioning, from the front end to the back end, from a billing standpoint, everything all the way through. That's what people are looking for. I don't really have too much detail apart from that. I think each one of you would have your own insight into what your onboarding process is. Just imagine automating all of that. That's what you got to get to, I think, in order to service a lot of the change in workforce in the small, the SOHO and the SME specifically, and less so as you go up market.
Well, that looks like those are all the questions we have for today. Jason, thanks again for your time and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Delaney.